My guest today on Behas With Barkha is the former Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, Najeeb Jung. In the last few days, we have seen Mr. Jung come out openly in support of the protests against the new citizenship legislation and the proposed NRC, or the National Register of Citizens. What's interesting is, ahead of Delhi election, Mr. Jung seems to have had a change of heart even about Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejirwal, who, if you will remember, during his tenure as LG, he had an extremely rocky and confrontational relationship with. Najeeb Saab, welcome to Behas With Barkha. I want to start by asking you, what made you finally go public with your support for the protests against the citizenship legislation? When you were appointed as LG of Delhi, there was a perception that you had good equations with the BJP, you were quite close to them. That doesn't, of course, mean you have to agree with everything that they do. So what happened? What was the tipping point for you?
I think the 15th December incident at the Jamia Millia Islamia motivated me to return to the university. Where
students were beaten up by police excesses.
So very mercilessly beaten up. What I learned from students was that the library was clearly marked out, tear gas shells were fired, girls were hurt, boys were hurt very badly. This, of course, was followed by the incident in the AMU. And then shortly afterwards, we saw the incident at the JNU. All these I thought were a bit much. And so basically, I went to Jamia to give my support to the students there. And as it transpired, they asked me to speak, and I spoke my mind. On the other aspect of your question, my tenure as Lieutenant Governor and my perceived not good relations with Arvind. Let me put the record straight, and I've said this before to TV channels and to newspapers. My differences with Mr. Kejirwal were purely on constitutional grounds, on the methodology that he wished to adopt and my way of looking at them. We differed at that, and at times it was bitter. Having said that, our personal relations always remained cordial, and we functioned. Even in those days, I advised Mr. Kejirwal that we can function much better if we could find a common way of interpreting the Constitution. His interpretation was different from mine. He went to the High Court, and fortunately and luckily for me, the High Court indeed agreed with my perception.
Now, there are two different parts to this, and we'll unpack them separately. Yeah. Your relationship with Arvind Kejirwal and your views on the citizenship legislation. I want to start with the citizenship debate first. The government argues that those of us, and I have to say us here even though I'm the interviewer because I have a strong publicly taken position on the citizenship legislation, that those of us who have criticized this are distorting the truth. The government's argument is that this is a benign fast-track citizenship for persecuted minorities of 3 Muslim countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh. And because these are Muslim countries, that is the only reason that Muslims have not been included in this fast-track citizenship, and that this in no way impacts Indian Muslims. Do you agree?
There are two aspects again to this. Number one is that indeed it is right that Muslims have been excluded because there is a perception that Muslims will not be persecuted in Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh. Although I do wonder what happens to the Ahmadiyyas in Pakistan and the Shias. We constantly hear of bombs being burst in mosques in Pakistan, which are normally used by Shias. So that's one thing. I also wonder why Jews were left out. Are they not persecuted? I mean, I'm sure the anti-Semitism indeed extends to these countries. But they may have been left out by accident. I mean, they're too small in number. The more important and germane question to this whole thing is that this is a violation of Article 14 of the Constitution. So it's a misconception to believe that the protests are purely on the ground that Muslims have been left out. I think and let me go back to Shaheen Bagh, for instance, as just an example, that this is the soul of the Muslim women that has found utterance after years of suppression. They were suppressed by Muslim men and by the Muslim community over years and years and years. They took it lying down. I think this time, the perception that they may be done in, or the Muslim community may be harshly done in, has turned the proverbial worm. So the soul has found utterance in these demonstrations that you see. The demonstrations, I believe, are not really led by, or as I think I know, by opposition parties.
Oh, not at all.
Or even by Muslim men. I think Muslim men hang around. But the fundamental support comes from young boys and girls, students. And so this is a combination of young students and women who have come out. Students because they feel aggrieved. They have no jobs. They have nothing to do really. I said somewhere else that when I was in my college years, we would do an MA and get a job.
Yeah.
Now you go to the university and you find by hundreds children doing PhDs. Fundamentally, it is because you have nothing else to do. The PhD gives you a little bit of money and 5 years to spare.
Now, let me pick up Shaheen Bagh, a place where I have gone to several times, done many reports from, spoken to many Muslim women. It has now become the new battlefield on which the Delhi elections are going to be fought. I think that's become quite clear in the last few days. The BJP has targeted it for being a space where so-called anti-national forces are converging. This is the BJP's perspective. They are looking very closely at funding. They've made allegations about funding. They've also picked up a speech that they say is associated with one of the organizers of Shaheen Bagh, a JNU alum called Sharjeel Imam, who's made a inflammatory speech talking about a separate Assam, though not at Shaheen Bagh, elsewhere. But this is what's happening. Now, are you concerned that in this essentially leaderless space, because that is what Shaheen Bagh is, there's nobody organizing, there's nobody deciding who comes on stage, who doesn't come on stage, who organizes, it was spontaneous. Are you concerned that Shaheen Bagh and a public movement could be discredited by voices on the fringe and by the BJP very clearly setting its target on it?
Well, any movement can be discredited by an incident here or there. But such discreditation doesn't last. The truth of the movement continues. I think that there is inherent danger in Shaheen Bagh. I mean, an incident can occur.
Explain that. What do you mean there is inherent danger?
Well, there could be a lathi charge. There could be an attempt to move these young women and old women out. There could be an agent put in between who could create an incident there. So these are dangers that are pregnant to the situation. But such incidents are bound to occur when there are movements of this size and intensity taking place all over the country. As we speak today, there are 13 Shaheen Bagh-like places in Delhi itself. So an incident can occur anywhere. I think Shaheen Bagh needs to be vigilant. I think that the movement is not as leaderless as it is perceived.
Explain that, because my sense is there's no one person or group or organization that you can go to and say, why was so-and-so on your stage, or you should do this, or you should do that. Is there anyone, for example, hypothetically, if the government wanted to open a dialogue, hypothetically, who would they talk to at Shaheen Bagh?
At the moment, if the government perceived this to be, say, a Muslim-led, although it is not, I think, but who do you talk to?
Yes.
There are no Muslim leaders. I mean, let's understand first that the community itself is leaderless. Now, coming back to this movement, I think coordination committees have been formed in all these places. And if you see a week ago, a delegation had gone to meet the Lieutenant Governor. Now, obviously, there is a group of people who are in charge and who are looking after. So I think you can find, I really believe the time has come for the government to reach out. This should not be allowed to continue. We can't afford it. The international press is speaking about it. International politicians are speaking about it. Governments may speak about it. And I don't think that we can afford it. So therefore, I really believe that the government should look for people to talk to, people who will be influential enough to go to these people and speak and sort out the matter, because time is critical. A month has passed, I think, in these agitations or more,
yeah.
and they haven't ebbed. If the thought process is that they will die a natural death, I don't think that's happening.
Can you elaborate on your concerns about Shaheen Bagh? You said that, you know, there's a danger sort of built into the situation.
Well, I believe all agitations can take a nasty turn. I have been in government long enough to know that law and order situations are not under anybody's control, really speaking. So there is an inherent danger, and I would advise caution on the part of all organizers. For instance, this imam who gave this speech, I mean, there should be a screening process that we don't want unnecessarily madmen. I mean, there are enough in the Islamic world to provoke people. We are seeing what they are doing elsewhere.
Yeah.
I think that this movement has kept out this crazy bunch of people. I said this in Jamia, that the movement must ensure that Islamic clergy do not interfere here. They are not trained and they are not qualified to interfere in a movement like this. Even if there are more Muslims involved in this movement, these people should ensure that the movement remains as secular and as pristine as possible.
That's a very important point, and there's been a reasonable amount of debate over what slogans are inclusive at the barricades, so to speak, and there's been some focus on the La ilaha illallah call that protesters have chanted on occasion. A huge debate within the protesting community itself. Where do you weigh in on that?
I think that people get emotional. These slogans should be avoided. They have no business to say La ilaha illallah. Having said that, this is again a fringe element you can't control. La ilaha illallah by itself would not be bad, but in a situation like this, it can be perceived as being, extremely pro-Muslim. I would say that in a movement like this, you should go for Vande Matram and establish greater credibility rather than going into Muslim sloganeering.
Now, where do you expect that expression of Muslim identity to go up till and no further? And the reason I ask you this is because there are protesters I've met, one said things like you, that this has to be inclusive. This is not a Muslim protest. This is a protest by Indians who care about the Constitution. There are others who say that if we as Muslims are being pushed to the margins, we are going to assert visibly, perhaps more visibly than before, our identity. How do you reconcile these two opinions?
This is the latter part of assertion, is the inevitability of what has been happening in the last 5-6 years. And I think that it is time for all of us to go back to the Vedantic spirit of eternal India and think of an inclusive India where our souls will speak out, where our identities will not take prime position, and we learn to speak as Indians, because that is absolutely essential in this charged atmosphere. So I agree entirely that there will be an element, and a large element, which will speak that language. But I think there is many Muslims and otherwise who think the way that I do, who believe in an absolutely inclusive India, who believe that the future of India lies in harmony and peace and love, and the language spoken of differentiating against the other should be stopped.
There is a sense, and there's a comment that you made about the Muslim community being leaderless. Yeah. There is a sense that the one big political failure has been the failure of India's Muslim community to throw up effective leadership. Is that absence being felt today like never before?
That absence has been absolutely pregnant since partition. I think with the exception of Maulana Azad, perhaps Dr. Faridi, Hifzur Rahman, Muslims have not produced leaders. Partly the complex of Pakistan pushed the educated Muslim into looking for jobs and professions and took him away from active politics. The element that went into active politics was not up to the mark. By not up to the mark, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I really believe that they were not leaders of class that could have led a community that was ill-read, that really belonged to the lower echelons of society, because a lot of the upper echelons had left for Pakistan. They were not educated enough. They were falling into the hands of Maulanas. And so, since the last 70 years, the community has struggled for leadership, and it continues to struggle today. I will give you an instance. There were major riots, I think, in 1977 or 78 in Aligarh. And the Muslims got very worried and they came to Delhi. And then they found that who do we take as our leader to talk to Morarji Bhai, who was then the Prime Minister? And the person they found to take them was Mr. Bahugna. So even at that time, Muslim leaders looked at Hindus. I mean, Lalu Prasad became a leader. He led Muslims. Mulayam Singh suddenly represented Muslims. And so any community that is maturing with history should learn to educate itself, should learn to gain a confidence in itself, should leave behind the complexes of partition, and then produce leaders.
Muslim politicians like Asaduddin Owaisi argue that one of the reasons for this gap is because the slogan of secularism has been so corroded and compromised by parties that claim to be secular. He's often targeted the Congress party, for example, for practicing an inauthentic secularism. Is that the problem, that you have today the word secular being a political football rather than the spirit of pluralism?
I think the spirit of secularism is missing in political parties. Secularism is a very nice thing to speak of, but barring the communists, no one has truly been able to speak of secularism in its pristine form. Because at the end of the day, you are looking at the vote. And you can talk of pure secularism in a Muslim constituency. But if you look at general constituencies, then you hem and haw and you butt and you if. And so I think that secularism, the place where it stands today, is largely because of electoral politics and because it doesn't gain you votes when it comes to the actual polling station.
Now, one of the other shifts in Indian politics is the appropriation of nationalism almost entirely by the right wing, which is why these protests are so fascinating, because it's like a reclaiming of the symbols of the nation, the flag, the anthem, the preamble. But so far, the BJP so effectively owns this space that you can have a minister in this government, Anurag Thakur, say from stage at an election rally, Desh ke gadaro ko goli maro salo ko. He's a minister in the central government. What does this say to you, Mr. Jung?
I think he stopped only at Desh ke gadaro.
He said Desh ke gadaro ko, and the audience, he's exhorting the audience to complete the slogan. We all know what the slogan is.
I'm sorry to hear that, and perhaps he should have been more careful being a minister and having sworn to the Constitution. But it is very true that initially the Jan Sangh tried very hard to take away this concept of nationalism, because at that time Jawaharlal spoke of a larger India. India had just broken up, and here was this man who still spoke so much of inclusiveness. And subsequently, of course, with the BJP, and now they have, I think, very successfully adapted and have been accepted as a nationalist party, leaving the others way behind, I think. And it would take them, or these others, a long time to come close to them. And that is the dichotomy, that you talk of secularism and you necessarily differentiate it from nationalism. So secularism takes a beating, and nationalism, the concept of nationalism, the flag of nationalism bears you fruit.
So how did we get here? Because has there been a flawed politics by liberals, by liberal parties, by not understanding the sentiment of the average Indian about the Indian state? Has that been undermined? Have progressive movements flopped on this count?
I think, Barkha, India is largely secular. Let's understand.
You believe that even today? When the debate is around India, 200 million Muslim citizens possibly feeling pushed to the margins of public life?
Well, India remains secular because 85% of India is Hindu. We can't deny that. So while there is a strong fringe element with this intense dislike for the Muslim, we can't dislike that either. There was another 15-20% which was on the wall, not knowing how to react to Muslim. Is the Muslim okay? Is he not okay? And I think there was a slide towards the not okay side in the last 15-20 years for various reasons. For international reasons, number one, how the Muslims have behaved internationally. I mean, they do no credit to themselves the way they have behaved in the Middle East. They have no concepts of democracy. Look at how Pakistan has behaved. Look at how Afghanistan has behaved. Look what the Taliban did to their women. So the man on the wall fell on the other side by seeing what happens. I come to Daryaganj all the time. You see young Muslim boys breaking the law so often. It comes from lack of education. It comes from lack of leadership. We must give them education. So let us not forget that there has been aggravation by the Muslim side. This has helped the far right in raising this anti-Muslim impression, and that is unfortunately winning the day.
But, you know, with kind of controlling the nationalism narrative, the right wing is actually able to get away with things that other groups would never get away with. And let me give you an example. Adnan Sami, who was Pakistani, is now Indian citizen, gets a Padma Award. He's the son of a Pakistani military officer, professional soldier. My issue is not with Mr. Adnan Sami at all. That his father was doing his job. The question is, if this were any other government that had given an award to the son of a Pakistani military officer, what would be the reaction? These are the very ironic times we live in.
Indeed, but I think even this government will be very embarrassed when they find out that this gentleman's father was indeed an Army Air Force officer who was bombing our air bases.
Yeah.
I think they didn't know that. So this has happened erroneously. Having said that,
you think it's been a mistake, not enough homework?
I'm sure there's been a mistake, but the government has enough firepower to cover up this mistake.
By saying what?
By saying that, that man was, as you said, that man was doing his duty, but this man is a great chap. He's come all the way from England. He sings very well. He sings natural patriotic songs and so on. So he's okay.
But how do you look at it?
I think it's a mistake. I would ignore it. I think this fellow is harmless. He's come to India. He sings a few songs. Let him be.
As a Muslim today, how do you feel? And I hate to tag that identity onto you, because in previous interviews I never would have. But I always say, it's like I used to say all my life, like a good product of that liberal bubble called St. Stephen's College, that I don't believe in caste. Then I grew up and I understood that because I had never faced caste oppression, because I came from privilege, I could make that point. Similarly, I say I'm non-religious. But had I been born Muslim, could I say, oh, I don't believe in that part of my identity today, in today's time?
You are here today because you see me as a Muslim.
Not only. You've been Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, you've had a fraught relationship with Kejirwal, and you've taken a public position on the citizenship.
I think a lot of people have started seeing me as a Muslim.
How do you feel about that?
And, well, I'm born a Muslim. I think I'm not a practicing good Muslim. My mother, who lived in this house, really wished that I would practice Islam. That's not happened. My two girls married outside the community. But that doesn't take away from me the fact that I was born a Muslim. And to that extent, it would hurt me if today people perceive me only as a Muslim, speaking for Muslims.
Sure.
In the case of the CAA and the NRC, I don't speak for Muslims. I'm speaking for the Constitution, which I perceive has not been correctly interpreted by the people in power. B, I believe that the NRC will hurt many in India, including non-Muslims, the Adivasis, the Dalits. I have worked in a state where there are Adivasis by lakhs, Madhya Pradesh. I know that they don't have any papers, that you can try your best, but they can't produce papers. That they are today concerned, not because they don't understand that the CA will eventually protect them, but the harsh fact that they will be asked to produce papers and then go to appellate authorities to say that, okay, we don't have these papers, but please believe we are Indians. So I have taken this position because I believe that the NRC and the CAA need to be tweaked. I am not saying that you remove them. I am saying that you need to tweak them.
By taking the religious filter out.
Take the religious filter out. It's a simple solution. And that would enable the entire world, the entire international community to see that India can take a step back, that we are indeed a mature democracy where you've heard the voice of the people on the streets for a year, for a month, sorry.
Yeah.
And they have been heard. These are women who never had a voice. Look at the advantage of the CAA today.
Yeah.
That really the voiceless have found a voice.
One of the women at Shaheen Bagh actually said that to me. She said Prime Minister Modi has always said Muslim women must find their voice, and here we are. Now, I want to shift focus to your relationship with Kejirwal as in your years as Lieutenant Governor. You said that it was a professional disagreement and not a personal one. Have you been in contact with him since then? Do you have a functional relationship? Would you say you've become friends?
I had a period when I was a little unwell.
Yes.
That was about 2 years ago.
Yes.
And Kejirwal and Mr. Sisodia came to visit me and wish me well. So I come back to my original thing that, but then let me also tell you that so did Mr. Jetli wish me well.
Yes.
So there were others across the line.
Yes.
And on every Eid, Mr. Rajnath Singh calls me and wishes me Eid. So I have a extremely good working relationship with the BJP. I had no qualms with them. My working relationship with Arvind swung between extremes. I think when we spoke on a one-to-one, we spoke with complete good formality. I think he respected me for my views, but we did not agree because he felt that that the path that I was propagating was too slow. Mm-hmm. It was bureaucratic. And he wanted to move much faster. By much faster, he needed to cut corners. And being the Lieutenant Governor, I could not allow him to cut corners. So that was the breach that we could not meet. That led to unpleasantness. But it never led to a personal ill feeling between us. So I should leave it at that, I think.
You said in recent statements that you believe that Arvind has his heart in the right place and that he has matured. What is the change you sense in him?
I indeed said that. I think that even when he started out with his Andolan, he started with the correct purpose, that he wanted to change what was not right. In the last 2 years, he has realized that he has to follow rules and systems much more. And breaking of rules was only, or trying to jump over rules was only creating more hurdles for him rather than helping him. So it's been a growing process, and he has indeed grown. I wish him the best.
There is a perception that he's the one opposition politician who sidestepped the citizenship debate for tactical reasons perhaps, but he has. As someone who's taken a very strong position on this issue, are you disappointed that he's not been more forthcoming?
Oh, Arvind is a politician par excellence. He can teach many politicians many lessons. So I think he's thought this through. He probably feels that it'll end up his losing a certain section of votes. At the same time, he believes that sidestepping CAA doesn't impact his Muslim vote.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, I think he believes, as do many others, that where do the Muslims go in today's environment? So I think he's sitting pretty with his Muslim vote, and he doesn't want to allow to annoy the others.
Finally, given that the Delhi elections are literally upon our head now, would you advise the Shaheen Bagh protesters to put a temporary halt in the period of the elections?
Barkha, there are two aspects to this. A, if you put a halt, then the fear is that the movement itself may peter off or die off, because to resurrect the movement again will be very difficult. But with the election fever mounting and the perceived polarization that is taking place, I think that the organizers there can be careful. I think between now and the 8th, some kind of reduction can take place. Perhaps traffic can be allowed a little more, with an understanding that they will regroup after the 8th and send out a message to others that they are not letting go the protest, but it is a sort of relaxation till the election time is over.
Thank you, Najeeb Jung, for a very thoughtful, and what I like is a set of complex thoughts, which in this age of reductionism we rarely find. Pleasure talking to you.